And if you know Chinese history, you know about the Century of Humiliation. It was a time when the foreign powers divided up China. China was very weak, and then various Chinese like warlords and um, made deals with the foreign imperialists, and those people are hated. I've seen many historical um, uh, Chinese films and also period dramas that are set in the early 20th century, and the message that comes through again and again, it was that China was humiliated, and those Chinese who collaborated with those imperialists are evil and must be defeated. And when the Chinese look at Taiwan, they see the same thing all over again. They see these Taiwanese collaborating with an imperialist power, that's the U.S., attempting to kind of, it's the last vestige of that century of humiliation. And I think, that there's just no question that China's going to take back Taiwan. And it'll be immensely popular when it's done. It'll say this finally ended. That was the last, again, vestige of the century of humiliation, and we stamped it out. It would be a great victory for Xi Jinping. Again, Xi Jinping's a very smart and cautious person, and he's not going to go in recklessly. But I think there's a chance that he will. I mean, I think there's a very powerful motivation that maybe John Mearsheimer doesn't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would make sense perhaps for China and Xi Jinping to make a move on Taiwan in the not too distant future, just because the U.S. has been greatly weakened through its conflicts in Ukraine as well as the Middle East. But I guess if I was China, we're continually being weakened. So maybe let it play out a little bit longer, just see what happens. So like you said, the U.S. empire is collapsing. Right, it's declining. So I don't see there as much of a rush for them to get that done. But I agree that it's the inevitable force. China's right there, Taiwan's right there, and also just the Taiwanese themselves. It's pretty mixed on reunification, isn't it? It's not so much, the way that the West views it is that all of Taiwan is wanting independence from the evil yoke of China. Right. Is that an accurate description at all, or
no? Well, of course, your own mother, who was born and raised in Taiwan, and her sisters. They're all in favor of China coming to liberate Taiwan because they consider themselves to be Chinese, and clearly they are. In Taiwan, you find something very similar to what has occurred in Ukraine. The Ukrainians try to pretend that they have nothing to do with the Russians. Of course, a large percentage of them are in fact ethnic Russians, and an even larger percentage are Russian speaking. And then those that aren't, who are, have a firm Ukrainian identity, well, that Ukrainian is basically a dialect of Russian. I mean, Kiev, Lvov, Lviv, this is not a different language. They're obviously very closely tied to the Russians. And you find the same thing in Taiwan, but among the Taiwanese nationalists, just like the Ukrainian nationalists, is this fiction that we have nothing to do with China. We're just a completely separate people. Now, of course you do. That all scattered through Taiwan, you see these temples, and they have Chinese sages and saints in the temple, statues of them, and the Chinese characters on the columns. And what are the holidays that they celebrate? They're all traditional Chinese holidays. They're Chinese, but there's this effort to deny it, just like Ukrainians are trying to pretend they have nothing to do with Russia, but those. Many Chinese, especially the older generation, are very upset at this. Like, again, your mother and your aunts, and they say, I have enough of this. Just let China come. Let's be part of China. That's our country. I would say they're definitely in a minority, but it's a significant minority. And then also, I would say on the nationalist side, okay, you would find, especially, among younger people, a lot of say, we don't want to have anything to do with China or whatever. Again, they've become obsessed, many of them obsessed with the West, like the Ukrainians have. But if it came to a fight, I think I don't think you're going to find many Taiwanese that are willing to risk their lives to defend their country. I may be wrong, but that's just the sense that I've had from living there and then, visiting in subsequent years. And
Right.
in
It
fact,
just seems
right.
it's funny that this is even really a debate. I mean, you just look at China, a population of 1.4 billion people, the manufacturing powerhouse of the whole planet. Next to right off the coast of it is Taiwan, where there is actually a sizable minority that identifies as Chinese and wants to have reunification already. So that's already an issue. But even if all of them were completely nationalists, want independence, you look at it. I mean, it's the same thing with Ukraine, but now the difference between Taiwan and China, now we have it times 10, in terms of the ability for Taiwan to actually even claim independence. I mean, it's just ludicrous to think that it's possible that somehow, don't worry, Taiwan, throw off the Chinese yoke, declare independence, and we got your back. Anybody realistically looking at it's like, no, that's suicide. That's how you destroy Taiwan. And Taiwan is a small island, population of less than 30 million people, population of Shanghai, one city in China is the whole population of Taiwan. So it's silly that we have this, that we're kind of fostering that environment there to try to, this independence movement. It's just so destructive for everybody. It's not
Right.
good for the Taiwanese. Clearly.
Well, yeah, the independence movement, in Taiwan, the nationalist movement in Ukraine, it's indigenous. It has indigenous roots, but it's become so powerful because they can rely on the U.S. for support, just like in Ukraine. If the U.S. had made clear early on, okay, no, we're not getting involved in this. We're not going to support you. You're going to have to make your own deals with your larger neighbor. I think that the whole nationalist movement never would have gone anywhere because, people look at them and say that, you're not going to take on Russia. This is stupid. Let's just make peace and live with them and coexist with them. And the same thing in Taiwan. But because this one faction can claim the U.S. as its ally, it becomes greatly empowered, and its words seem to have some sort of reality. It's like, and that's all quite unfortunate because if war really does break out, if the U.S. does become involved, it's going to be to the humiliation of the U.S. And then there's a chance that the U.S. might just turn tail and run, say, we don't want to do this. In any case, it'll lead to the destruction, or at least partial destruction, of Taiwan.
Right. I mean, I imagine the nationalist movement in Taiwan has to be losing some steam just if they're watching what's happening in Ukraine. Right.
You would think so.
Kind of like what,
right. You would think
like
so.
what you said in Georgia, the Georgia Dream Party was holding up, pictures of destroyed Ukrainian cities and said, "Do you want Georgia to become like this?" Essentially, that's the same thing with Taiwan, right? I mean, if you're a Taiwanese nationalist, you're watching we got the U.S. behind our back. Well, that's what Ukraine thought, and that's what they said, and we're watching what's happening right now in real time. We're seeing their whole country destroyed, a whole generation of men essentially either fled or killed. It's horrific.
Right.
But you said it's not actually losing steam, the nationalist movement, despite what we're all witnessing happening in Ukraine.
I can't answer that question directly. I don't know if it's gaining a momentum or losing. It's the current leader, the current president of Taiwan, is probably the most nationalist that Taiwan has ever had, and he's come very, very close to declaring independence for Taiwan. And again, the PRC has made it clear again and again that if Taiwan ever does declare independence, China will attack, will take Taiwan back by force. So he's come right up against that line. Now, he in the recent elections, he did not even receive a majority of the votes. He received a plurality, and the reason that he got elected is that there was a third-party candidate that drew away a lot of votes that otherwise, probably most of which would have gone to the Kuomintang, the nationalist, more conservative party that wants to maintain friendlier relations with China. So it's not a majority that supports him, but he's there, and he's a real hothead. So we'll see.